no clear method of attack? Do your games too often just consist of a beginning, a muddle and an end? A better understanding of positional chess will immeasurably improve your game, and it's simply more satisfying to have a grand scheme in the back of your mind. So what is positional chess? A positional move is one which is not a tactic, does not involve a combination, but either strengthens your position or weakens your opponent's. Dr. Max Over once said that strategy demands reflection, tactics demand a penetrating glance. And it's the reflection on a position that I want to look at here. The ways in which you may strengthen your position can take many forms. Three key ideas are improving the position of your king, improving your pawn structure, and manoeuvring a piece to a more effective square. How you manoeuvre your pieces is one of the most important aspects of positional chess. It's amazing how if you get one redundant piece and put it on the right square, then somehow your whole position works and your opponent's position can sometimes just collapse. This is one classic example of this. This is a game I had a few years ago against Matthew Sadler. I was playing black. Here it's black to move. I think black's doing rather well here. Look at those rooks doubled on the e-file, putting pressure on the knight on e2. Now of course the knight is defended by the bishop, so they can't launch in straight away. But another thing that's really nice about black's position is the bishop on g7 and the knight on f5 looking at that pawn on d4. Now if you notice, that pawn cannot be protected by another pawn. It relies on the support of the knight on e2, which remember is being looked at by the rooks, the support of the rook on d1 and the queen on a4. So there's uncomfortable pressure on white's position. Moreover, the pin of the bishop to the queen is a little bit annoying. It means it's very difficult for white to untangle. There's lots of pressure on white's position, but it's not immediately obvious how black should make progress here. I think the obvious move is to play rook takes knight on e2. Sacrifice an exchange. And after bishop takes e2, well, knight takes d4. After all, that bishop on a5 is looking a bit loose. But here, I think white can just about keep things together by playing the bishop to d3. And, well, there are a few ideas for black, but I don't find it totally convincing. Given that this sacrifice doesn't look particularly clear, have a think about this position. How would you, if you were black, make progress from here? Perhaps I can give you a bit of a hint. Which is black's worst placed piece in this position? If you thought that black's queen was the worst placed piece in black's camp, well, I know what you mean. It's not brilliantly placed in the corner. However, it does actually fulfill one very important function. White has some kind of attack going on the queen side. I think if it were white to play, some kind of idea like taking on c6 and moving the rook down to b6 looks attractive. However, because of the pin of the bishop to the queen, then this is a bit of a problem, because now the rook swings across and puts more pressure on the bishop. So in fact, the attack on c6 is really irrelevant here. No, it's the black knight on h6 which is really black's worst placed piece in the position. It's blocked by its brother on f5, and obviously it can't move to g4 because of the pawn on h3. I decided to do something about that knight. I played my king to h7. Looks like a mysterious move, but if you think about what's happening to that black knight, all will be revealed. Now white is in a bit of a gum here. He can't really do very much because of that pressure to the pawn on d4. White played the rook up to d2 to give the knight on e2 some extra protection in case he needs to move the bishop. And so I embarked on my plan of repositioning the knight on h6, which was doing nothing. So it went back to g8. Now, Sadler brought the queen back to a2. That means he can now move the bishop on a5, and the queen is protected by the rook on d2. And I continue with my plan. Knight on g8 came to f6. Now you can see where that knight is heading. That fantastic square on e4, putting even more pressure on White's position. White played the bishop back to c3, offering an exchange of queens. Of course, the bishop also gives some extra protection to the pawn on d4. Now, I don't want to exchange queens. I'm on the attack, so I just move my queen over to c8. It's also looking at the pawn on h3 potentially, so it's happy to play that one. White captured on c6. Obviously I recaptured with the pawn, keeping my centre pawn on d5 well protected. But now White is in big trouble. That black knight is coming into e4, where it hits just about everything. He brought the knight back to g1, clear it out of the way of the rooks and protect the pawn on h3, and now came the triumph of the black knight. It moved into e4. This manoeuvre has been completely successful. Obviously, White cannot leave that knight on e4. If the rook moves, for instance, to d3, then I capture on c3, White recaptures, and I just take the pawn on d4. So White must capture the knight on e4. And now I can recapture with the pawn. And supported by the rooks, that pawn is just going to blow open White's king position. There's really nothing to be done. White played the rook over to e1, and I just continued the attack. Pawn to e3. Well, White's position is just a complete wreck now. The rook came across to e2, and now I crashed in. Pawn takes pawn on f2. If king takes pawn on f2, I think there are many ways to win, but perhaps the simplest is just queen to c7, attacking the pawn on g3, and White can't defend it. In the game, Sadler actually played rook takes rook on e7, and I took the knight on g1 and got a new queen, check. King takes g1, rook takes rook, and I was a piece up, and so he resigned. If we go back and just compare the two positions, one where the knight was on h6 and the other where the knight has found its way to e4, that's really the only difference in black's position. Essentially it's the same, minus a couple of pawn captures and the queen move. But that knight manoeuvre has made all the difference. White's position just collapses. This just shows how crucial it can be to find the right squares for your pieces. Often it's more important to visualize a good square rather than calculate 20 moves ahead. I certainly didn't do that here.